Yay! Much
Hopefully the
less
magic of the internet
excitement this
won't,
time.
kill us again. So, but here we go again for this week, part 2 of the Hangout dedicated to James Bond. I'm your host, Christopher, and I'll let everybody else.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I daily vlog, although this week's worth of daily vlogging was all uploaded today. So that shows how great I am at doing that. And I do movie reviews and anime reviews, and I talk a lot of rubbish. And yeah, occasionally I do video games. You can find me at Took It Home to Jenny on Twitter, Took It Home to Jen on Twitter, and Took It Home to Jenny on YouTube, and that's pretty much it. On to the next person.
Hey guys, I'm Tor, and you can find me at Tor's Times on basically any social media platform on the internet. And I have been a complete lazy blob all week. I haven't posted any videos, but usually I post things like movie reviews and other random stuff. So, yay.
I'm Ray. My YouTube is RayHS1984. My Twitter is Raymond H. Smith. And I also have another YouTube channel called Ray's Netflix Reviews, where I watch something random on Netflix and talk about it for like 4 minutes straight with no cuts. Also, did you know that Iggy Azalea's real name is Amethyst? Okay, I'm done. Next. Go ahead, Chris.
All right. Okay, and I am, again, your host this week. My name is Christopher, and you can find me at Easy Chair Reviews on YouTube, and at Review Easy on Twitter, and www.easychairreviews.com for some blog-type stuff. As I said previously, we're going to be talking about James Bond this week, but before we're going to get into that, we're going to have a few trivia questions. I made these up, and I am a huge James Bond fan, so unfortunately they might be a little bit above the layperson's understanding, so we're going to get into this and see how it goes, and if I've overshot myself, then we're just going to jump in the questions and go from there. So we'll do the standard Hangout trivia rules, where go ahead and type your name into the chat room, and if you got the answer, go ahead and press enter, and the first one whose name pops up we'll get a chance to answer the question. So, if we're all ready, we're going to go ahead and jump into the first question I got. Now, these questions, again, are pretty much going to be just about the James Bond movies. I've read a lot of the books, so I'm pretty familiar on all James Bond lore. But since this is Movie Club Strikes Back, we're going to talk about strictly the movies. So the first question I've got, that there has been one actor who played the same character, the same role in 17 different Bond movies. I want the name of the actor and or character, both if you can provide them. Okay, Jenny?
I'm guessing the character is Q.
Q is correct. Yep.
And I can't remember which. Like, I know it's John Cleese for my generation of Bonds, as it were, but I can't remember what the original Q actor is, and I'm sorry.
Well, I did ask for either the character or the actor, so that'll be 1 point for Jenny. The actor's actual name is Desmond Llewellyn. Yeah, and he played it in for 17 characters, or for 17 movies. He played the same character. For a follow-up point, do you know what the letter Q, it actually stands for something? Do you know what it stands for? Jenny?
Quartermaster.
That's correct.
As in Master of Arms. And I'm a nerd.
All right, on to our next question. Before joining Her Majesty's Secret Service, James Bond served in the Navy. What rank did he attain? Jenny?
I've heard it being called Lieutenant Bond. Is that right?
No, that's
I
not
think-
correct.
Oh. Okay.
I don't know if it's rankings. I might have a clue.
The tail end is not that one.
I don't have a clue either. Swab.
Sergeant?
No, he actually attained the rank of commander. I think you'll sometimes hear him referred to as
Oh.
Commander Bond. So,
You see, I did know that.
lieutenant commander is a rank. It's just not his rank of lieutenant. Okay. All right. Moving on to our next question. Bond is famous for carrying a certain type of sidearm. Do you know what type of weapon that is? It's a pistol. Raymond.
I think in GoldenEye it was a PP7. I think is what it's called. That right? Is that what it's called? I don't remember. PP something. It's been a long time. PPK is probably right.
PPK is correct. PP7.
Oh well, I knew the PP part. That was close.
It's actually different. I'm not even sure if there's a PP7.
Oh, it is. It's a PPK 7.65 millimeter. I just looked it up.
Yeah.
So there's a PPK 7. So I was wrong. Minus points for Ray.
Well, Sir PP. All right. Moving on. Let's see here. Through several movies, Bond faced off against a criminal organization known as Spectre. Does anybody know what Spectre actually stands for? Yeah, see. Okay.
Secret. I lost after S.
Yeah. Special
people
executive
in
for counterintelligence, terrorism, revenge, and extortion.
Revenge!
Yeah.
Revenge and extortion? Really?
They know they're villains.
That's beautiful. Like, it's in their title. Like, we must avenge ourselves.
Which is
I
Inspector
wonder what
Force is
their
going to be the
business
name
venture
of the upcoming James Bond movie, so I'm looking forward to that because I think they're going again back to their roots.
Nice.
All right. That one's probably too hard. Nope. All right. All but 6 of the James Bond movies have been titled after actual Ian Fleming stories. Can you name any of the 6 that aren't titled after an Ian Fleming either novel or short story? I think Ray, I think you came in first.
We talked about this earlier. GoldenEye was novelist. Yeah, GoldenEye wasn't an Ian Fleming one.
That's correct. GoldenEye was not an Ian Fleming novel, but for a follow-up point, do you know what the relevance is to GoldenEye? That did come out of the Ian Fleming era.
I can't even fake an answer.
You see, I'd be interested. I don't know the answer, but I'd be interested to know the answer because the theme song for GoldenEye always really, really confused me because it's got nothing whatsoever to do with the plot, which makes me wonder whether or not the theme song is written about something to do with the books. That it's just like, is it something to do with the books? Like, please tell me, inform me, because I'm interested.
No, GoldenEye was actually the estate name for Ian Fleming's estate in Jamaica. It's where he wrote most of the James Bond novels. So, interesting piece of trivia. At least I think so, but again. All right. We'll go with one more, and then I think I'll wave the white flag of surrender. All right. In 2 movies, the Bond family motto is actually mentioned. I want to know what the name of what the motto is.
Nope.
Oh no.
Like I
Does
feel
anybody
you
know
know
the
when it's like I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm gonna throw my hat in for. I'm pretty sure it's mentioned in Skyfall. Am I right? Is that one?
I think Chris is frozen.
Yeah, I
Oh
think
no,
freezing up.
Chris
This is going to be difficult.
Oh.
So I'm assuming that's a blank.
I'm guessing. I'm pretty sure it's mentioned in Skyfall.
It might be mentioned in Skyfall. I don't remember.
I can't remember it specifically, but I've got the feeling, like, given that it's all about James Bond's past and stuff, that I'm pretty sure it is mentioned at some point in a sort of like, this is your motto, and he's like, no, my motto.
According
That's
to
my
Ian
James Bond
Fleming,
impression.
yeah, the motto for the Bond family is in the Latin it's Orbis Non Sefundi, which means the world is not enough.
Oh, well, the world
again,
is not
the
enough.
title of the movie, The World Is Not Enough, and it was actually first mentioned, I think, in Her Majesty's Secret Service. So Bond kind of goes undercover as a heraldry guy. Okay, so there's
the world is not enough. That it was kind of like a throwaway line, like the world is not enough family motto. I always just thought that was a snappy comeback. I didn't think that was actually his family motto.
Yeah, it actually. I mean, he actually was given that as the.
Nice.
They must also take over the moon.
Yeah, as you kind of learn more about the James Bond lore, you find they throw a lot of that kind of stuff, particularly into the older movies when Ian Fleming wasn't around anymore. But a lot of self-referential sort of asides. Okay, so there's the there's the extent of our trivia challenge for this week. Particularly interesting. You know, in the James Bond novels, which then came into, they made those into movies. But Ian Fleming actually wrote one other book that was not about James Bond that they turned into a movie. Does anybody know what that one was? I'll give you a hint. It had to do something with another car with amazing gadgets inserted inside.
I'm going to cheat and try to look it up.
Chitty Bang Bang?
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He wrote that.
Yeah, found
Really?
it.
Yeah, Ian Fleming wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Nice. That has literally just blown my brain out.
All right.
I want to see a mashup of those two films.
Well, the guy who directed, the producers who produced the early James Bond movies, Cubby Broccoli and Henry Salzman, actually produced Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as well. And the assistant director in that, a guy named Young, went on to direct Her Majesty's Secret Service. So it was a very close-knit family when it came to this sort of thing.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of delve into our topics for this week, and we're going to talk about, obviously, Bond. And I want to first start off by talking about, Bond has been a long franchise, played by several different actors, several different directors and a lot of different screenwriters. But there's always been certain elements that are kind of core to the Bond character. And I'd like everybody to kind of discuss what they think makes, a Bond film in general. What are those characteristics of a Bond film that really kind of come to mind when you think about one? And give everybody a chance to kind of mull that for a moment. And for me, it's, again, being a fan of the books, I go back to those, and the movies really became about, a super spy and espionage, but at the core, it was just kind of this tough guy. He was in a very unusual set of circumstances, and you see this throughout both the novels and the books. You know, just this kind of intelligence agent who has to, you know, stop some crazy madman from destroying the world some way. And in particular, with you look at the Sean Connery ones, it's not about the gadgets and stuff like that. It's just him kind of being able to out-tough the bad guys, and it's just kind of that veneer of smooth sophistication covering this total badass, which I always found really interesting. And to me, when a movie hits that tone, it really makes a good Bond film. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
Well, for me, growing up on the films, kind of the immediate thought that pops into mind is the line from, I think it's not Never Say Never, it's The World, the Pierce Brosnan one with the newspaper crazy guy. Like,
Tomorrow Never Dies.
Tomorrow Never Dies. I knew there was never in there. Where it's like martinis, girls and guns, it's murder on this love affair, and it's from the theme song. And that just kind of sums up what I think about when, like, it immediately pops into my head. And similarly, there was a YouTube parody, which was a song which was they put lyrics to the James Bond theme, and like, information through flirtation. And like, it's one of the best things ever. I don't know whether or not it's still on the internet because it's really old school. It's like, well, you know, 2004 level of YouTube history. But it's like, I learnt the whole thing. Like, I have a way with women. Usually it ends bad. And it just, like, for me, that's what sums up. It's kind of those stereotypical tropes of the James Bond universe: the alcoholism, the misogyny, and the weaponry, and the gadgets. And I know that's maybe not the most kind of intelligent way of looking at it, but that's just kind of what I just automatically associate with James Bond as a franchise.
Well, that is kind of. Go ahead, Tor.
I was going to say, James Bond is kind of like, James Bond movies to men are like chick flicks to women. Like, it specifically, there's like, you know, the womanizing, the drinking. It's this like smooth operator guy on all these adventures, saving the world and all this. Like, it's all the things that like you could project yourself sort of to make men happy. I don't know if the books are exactly the same, but it seems like you would want to project yourself into that character.
Yeah, and it is interesting if you look, particularly like the early James Bond movies with Sean Connery. Those were being made when Ian Fleming was still writing the novels, so they're very much true to form. And it is particularly interesting, I think, if you look at how the movies evolved with the times. Because if you look at the old Sean Connery films, he is very much a misogynistic, kind of brutal. Yeah, it's the martinis and the cars, and very much the male fantasy. But I think if you look at it, particularly where it went in the Brosnan era and even now into the Craig era, where they've really kind of toned down some of the more over-the-top behavior that Bond has been traditionally associated with. The women aren't just arm candy anymore. So at least that's how I've kind of seen it.
Yeah, I was going to say that in more modern movies, the women have like lines and actually do stuff and can fight themselves and have some semblance in the story other than just being his prize at the end of the movie.
Yeah, like, I think they really started working on that with the beginning of Pierce Brosnan, where they were like, yeah, let's actually give these women some character traits. Like, Pierce Brosnan, they really brought in, like, let's have evil women. Let's make some villainesses, okay? Let's not just have them being, like, henchwomen. Let's let them be the mastermind. Like, Elektra is one of the most disturbing villains of all time. She's not the ultimate showdown villain, but she's the mastermind, and I really like. I don't particularly like her, but I like the concept. And like most of the Pierce Brosnan girls are actually like they brought in a lot of villainy and a lot of like, I wouldn't say complexity because of Halle Berry's character, but, you know.
And when I look, you know, there were certainly a lot of the, again, going back to Connery, a lot of those women that he interacted with, some of them were very much a product of the 50s, 60s kind of mindset. And I hate to kind of say it because her name, or her character name, has been associated with some of the biggest James Bond stereotypes, but in Goldfinger there's Pussy Galore, and she's actually kind of a very strong foil for Bond initially. You know, she's not just kind of the lay around, you know, arm candy.
Yeah, the names of the women in these movies is pretty good. And like Jenny was saying, they introduced the strong women in the Pierce Brosnan ones. One of the things, like, I don't really remember that movie too well because I saw it when it first came out, so I was fairly young. But wasn't there like a crazy evil Russian woman who like killed a man with her thighs?
Yeah, Xena.
That's like the Venus thing I remembered of the movie.
I was telling Chris.
That's the first Brosnan one. That's Goldeneye, and it's I can never pronounce her name right because it's Famke Janssen, you know, from all the X-Men movies, what have you. So she played Xenia Onatopp.
Her name reminds me of female anatomy. I'm just going to reference that song.
Yeah, we were talking about that before the hangout started. I was telling Chris, basically all I remember from James Bond is that Xena kills some dude during sex. About all I remember from GoldenEye. The rest I just remember from the video game. I get the video game and movie confused. I've played hundreds of hours.
To be fair, I think I was like 5 when that movie came out.
I've played hundreds of hours of GoldenEye. So.
I watched GoldenEye on recorded video years and years and over again. It was my favorite Bond for many years because it was. I really liked the theme song, and I remember bringing it into school as a things that I would have on a desert island with me was the video of GoldenEye, and I don't know why.
Speaking of you know, the Bond girls and their ridiculous names, and they've had a few, you know, some really good ones. I'd like to kind of hear everybody's you know, favorite Bonds, you know, villain or Bond girl, or just, you know, some of the things that they really like, you know, those characters that they like to pull out and have made a mark on them as far as watching the movies. My favorite Bond girl is actually the only one he ended up marrying, which was Tracy Draco in Her Majesty's Secret Service. You know, this was again another strong character, another strong female character. Just past the Connery era, this was again Her Majesty's Secret Service, which starred George Lazenby as James Bond, the only one he did. But the character of Tracy was played by Deanna Rigg, and I think that was a very interesting character and a very interesting story. I think that one, to me, is one of the most underrated of the Bond films. So that's one of my personal favorites, even though I'm kind of on the outside of the loop when it comes to it. Most people kind of think that one was not so good, and I think part of that was just because he had to follow Connery, and nobody was going to do well after that. What about you guys? Any favorite pieces?
Well, as on Her Majesty's Secret Service goes, I think more people that don't like that movie are probably people that haven't seen it. They just say, oh, it's Lazenby, not Sean Connery, so that one must suck, and kind of convince themselves that it's not good, even though they've never actually watched the movie. That people were happy with him and wanted him to do it. It's kind of his choice to stop doing them.
Well, yeah, he really got fed up with the. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jenny.
Sorry. When it comes to Bond girls, there's the ones that kick ass are usually really underdeveloped characters, or they're really preposterous characters, while probably my favorite character in terms of realistic development is Vesper from Casino Royale, because the scene in the shower is one of the most like you see these characters as people rather than archetypes, and that's kind of the first Bond girl that actually for me wasn't just like someone that could really affect Bond rather than someone who is just there as a side piece. And I don't particularly like how they handle it in Quantum of Solace, where it becomes a whole other thing. But I think that like the way that they developed her character, so she was kind of like a human element in a film that could be a very like the whole of Quantum of Solace is kind of grounding Bond back into a reality, and I think Vesper was a really important part of that. Bringing this gorgeous, incredibly smart woman and actually putting her into a world where with modern female characters rather than like the background females in some of the other Bonds are genuinely just depressing. Although I have to give a shout out to Agent Triple X. I can't remember what her real name is, but I can remember absolutely loving her. And it's not For Your Eyes Only, it's The Spy Who Loved Me. I can remember loving her. Because she's literally like, you killed my boyfriend, I'm going to kill you.
Oh, I'm forgetting the actress's last name right now. But yeah. But going back to Vesper Lynd, she's I mean, of course, Casino Royale is chronologically the first James Bond story. That was the first novel Ian Fleming wrote. And people who get way too much into this, like me, and I think that's kind of the reason James Bond developed all those sort of misogynistic tendencies he did throughout the rest of them, because he actually did love this girl. She did betray him. And then, he kind of had to deal with that. So you could almost kind of see the rest of the James Bond mentality as a reflection of that. But yeah, I think they handled that particularly well in the recent Casino Royale movie, in just getting that dynamic correctly. Because to make an interesting female character that holds her own in that kind of environment, you don't have to make her into a carbon copy of a male with just the female physique. You can make her an interesting female character in her own right, and I think Casino Royale is one of the movies that has done that correctly.
Yeah, that's one of the few I've seen. I have the DVD for it around somewhere. I had that in Quantum of Solace. I did look up the actress that played Agent Triple X, and it's Barbara Bosch. And her character name is Anya Amasova before she became Agent Triple X.
Yeah, I can remember really loving her. She's just awesome. Like one of the few ones who she's a badass. I love her. I mean, she has the whole drama queen thing at the end where the Bond villain does the quintessential, I shall change your outfit for the sake of this scene for no real reason. But I still enjoyed it. Time to wear some sexy laundry.
What about the villains, Bond villains? Anybody's got a favorite one of those?
I don't know the name, but wasn't there one that had like metal teeth and
Jaws.
just like chew through cables and stuff? It's just so I like the really ridiculous ones.
And that's also kind of been a mainstay, the kind of ridiculous henchman. You had Jaws with the metal teeth, or Oddjob with the hat he could throw at things.
Yeah. But you gotta like Oddjob because he's played by a professional wrestler. So Harold Sakata.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
But yeah, Jaws, who actually appeared in, I think 3. I think he was in 3.
3 or 4, and then he gets redeemed at the end and gets a really adorable girlfriend.
That's true. Moonraker. Not the greatest of Bond films, but the Roger Moore years tended to be dark years. So.
I think dark is not the right word. I think light-hearted, practically like fluorescently light-hearted.
Yeah, that's why I was never a big fan of the Moore movie. I mean, some of them were pretty good, and one of my favorite villains is Scaramanga in The Man with the Golden Gun, played by Christopher Lee, who very rarely
It's
makes a
fantastic.
step. Yeah, and
And
just
don't
that.
forget-
I think it's just that final duel between Scaramanga and Bond, where they've got the shootout in that funhouse, and it's a great little scene. I enjoy that one, but again, the More Years not great, but oh well.
Don't forget Jaws is also in Inspector Gadget, so.
He's in Inspector Gadget?
Yeah, he's in Inspector Gadget, same actor playing Jaws.
Where? I don't remember this.
Like when Inspector Gadget's like on a whatever you got zip line, he like bikes through the cord. And at the end of the movie, you have a whole bunch of like villains from famous movies in it.
Like Henchman Union.
Yeah, the Henchman Union at the end of the movie, and he's in it too.
He is! Oh my gosh, he is! I've just remembered that. Like, hi everyone, I'm a minion.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Jaws.
Yeah, he's labeled in the credits as famous bad guy with silver teeth.
Yeah. Probably so they don't have to pay the copyright fees on that one, but.
Yeah, and they do have Odd Job in that, but it's not played by Sakata. He was dead by then. And he's famous villain with deadly hat, famous identifier of seaplanes, and famous Native American sidekick.
Nice.
And
I'm
Keith
trying to-
Morrison is famous assistant to Dr. Franken something.
I'm trying to think of like the best Bond villain, because like I think Elektra was pretty badass. Along with, I can't remember what the name of her male partner was in that, because he was all like super powered because he had like a bullet in his brain so he couldn't feel anything, and she was just a crazy bitch.
Well, I mean, certainly one of the most iconic was Blofeld, who was kind of the major foil for Bond for a number of films. It was actually, as Bond was played by a number of actors, so was Blofeld. I think the final count was like five actors. It's probably going to be 6 once this next Bond movie comes out, but that was his major foil for most of the Connery years.
I think he's going to have issues being called Blofeld in the modern era. I think they might have to like reinterpret the pronunciation or something in order to handle teenage mentality.
Yeah,
Maybe I don't know.
I don't see a sequel of James Bond Octopussy coming out anytime soon, but.
And why not?
How is that allowed to be a movie? Nowadays, if you tried to have a movie with that title, it would never be allowed.
Well, again, that was actually the original title of the book. You know, they actually called it Octopussy.
I noticed that.
It's kind of one of those sad things that the most recent, the Daniel Craig Bonds, they've had really great stories and the acting's been great and they've really grounded the story, but they haven't really had any iconic villains. Like, I can't really remember any of the villains from the last 3 Bond films, and they don't hit home at all. And so I'm looking forward to having, like, if Daniel Craig can get like a really great alter ego to face off against, because the Pierce Brosnan ones got steadily more and more ridiculous to the point of like, I have a cyber bodysuit and I've been genetically changed my race so I can infiltrate things, and I also don't sleep because of the magical mask thing. And that one was just all sci-fi, all crazy, all the time. So I'm looking forward to like some iconic but slightly more realistic villains. But going back to the song that I keep quoting, villains cannot be beat until they all agree that they have used their one crazy deformity. Because they're all crazy and they're all deformed.
Well, I think Christopher Waltz is in. I mean, I know he's signed on for this next iteration of Bond. He might end up being the villain, just on speculation. So hopefully that's going to be the. He might play Blofeld, and so hopefully we will get a good villain to foil on Bond.
Looking it up, they did release most of the main cast names in December.
Yeah, but I'm not sold that because I know they gave him as some other name, so I'm not sold yet. We'll see when the movie comes out.
Oberhauser? Is that going to be the bad guy?
Yeah, if that's his character, but
played by Christopher Waltz.
Yeah, that might just be a misdirection. So I see we were joined by Liam, our resident Scotsman, which is very appropriate for this discussion because James Bond is in fact Scottish.
Of course he is. Yeah, we're all spies. That's why there are so few of us.
Yes, there are actually hundreds of you. You're just hidden around the world.
In the Highlands. We're all in the Highlands.
Another bit on that one is that James Bond didn't have a Scottish ancestry until after Ian Fleming saw Sean Connery play James Bond in the films, and he liked the portrayal so much he wrote that into the novels that James Bond was actually Scottish by origin. So
Sean Connery is the real James Bond.
Yes.
I can see that.
All right. Okay. So let's look at our next topic. As far as the tone of the James Bond films, some of them are. I mean, they've obviously changed over the years. We said some of the more ones are more comedic in nature. But again, they all focus around the idea that James Bond is this kind of super spy, which would lend it to its espionage. But there are also a lot of them have these heavy action scenes. So what do you think generally works better for Bond, whether it's the over-the-top action or the kind of more espionage elements, the intelligence portion of it?
I'm always the action guy. I always prefer the action. Even when you're playing games and stuff, like, I don't want to sneak around. I want to see explosions and shoot stuff and cool gadgets, and that's the part I like the best.
I feel like this question's like choosing between your children. You know what you mean? I can't choose which one is more important than the other or more enjoyable. Because whenever I think James Bond, I think both awesome car chase scenes with awesome gadgets accompanying the car or on the car, whatever have you. And then obviously the sneaking into the villain's lair or sneaking in and disposing of the various henchmen that are just scattered about the place in very creative ways.
And the henchmen are really easy to knock unconscious. All the time.
I feel like, in a way, the way that James Bond has been written as a character, he doesn't actually do that much espionage. Like, he's not usually in a specific place to get any information or do anything like that. He's mostly there just to murder people. Like, there is very little actual spy work that he does, and he's so cocky that even when he is undercover, he usually tells me, he's like, nope, I'm totally Bond, James Bond, a banker. But I'm not really a banker, right? You all know this. Like, you know that I'm coming to kill someone. You know who I am. I'm James Bond. Okay, let's move on. Like, the number of times they've been like, you've got a code name. And he's like, nope, I'm Bond, James Bond.
So are you?
I feel like all they need to do. All they need to do to catch him is ask the bartender who ordered the drink shaken, not
Yeah.
stirred, and then they're like, "It was him."
Yeah. Has anyone around here ordered a martini? Yep, that guy. Well, just shoot him now. Just shoot anyone who orders a martini
It wouldn't even
wrong.
be that. He would just, they would ask the question and he would come over and introduce himself as James Bond, because that's
Bond, James Bond.
who
Or like the guy who's like buried in attractive supermodels. Like he's literally just like surrounded by them.
Yeah, I think Cracked.com did a video on how they go through the ways in which James Bond is actually the worst spy ever, just based on the fact that he's in no way stealthy or anything like that. And yes, it is true, but I look at like the Craig movies, and they kind of tone down a lot of the heavy, over-the-top action elements. Like if you look at again the old Connery ones, particularly towards the end, there was always this giant battle scene at the end, whether it's like all these ninjas against these guys, or this underwater battle. There's this huge kind of anti-espionage element to it. Whereas with the Craig ones, at least you kind of feel like it's still very much low key. So I appreciate that. Another piece is the.
Oh, Chris, you frozen.
Frozen.
Count
Johnny,
to
quick,
20
sing the
and then
song
really
until
start
he comes
talking
back.
again. It's one of the things that
Just
kind
sing
of
the
like
James Bond song.
Doctor Who kind of fell into the same sort of pothole, which was that in order to make the story compelling, they kind of need to keep it controlled and like sneaky. And when the world is at risk and the world doesn't know, that's somehow a lot more compelling than the whole world knowing that it's about to blow up. And that's kind of
I was
one of those
gonna
things
say-
that, like, if there was a giant laser cutting through icebergs in the middle of nowhere, then the world is going to know that someone called James Bond is blowing stuff up. Well, if it's like, a guy who's going to a casino to try and get money out of people who are doing bad things, that's so much cooler and so much, like, it's scarier because nobody knows. Anyway, Chris, you're back, so you can carry on talking.
No, I think we kind of got to where I was going with it. So it's just the idea of these two different sides to the character that we get to see, and sometimes the espionage piece is a little more interesting than just the straight action piece, but not always as entertaining to watch. The other piece I kind of like looking at is the idea of the two different aspects of the Bond character, as far as the cold-blooded ruthlessness and then the suave sophistication. Because we get instances, particularly with Connery, where he's very cold-blooded, very ruthless, and Roger Moore, I think, always played the very suave, sophisticated guy. Again, a bit humorously, but they focus more on that aspect. But where do you think that the attraction to the character lies in the balance of the two?
I think it's the ability to be ruthless and cold-blooded and brutal with people, but also maintain the air of suave and sophistication that really draws people to the character. It's the ability to balance between the two. Whereas, like, normally you'll see villains that can only go ruthless and brutal and, bloodthirsty, but not have the whole kind of suave, sophisticated kind of way about them.
We talked about before when we talked about Arrow, where he just straight out murders henchmen randomly, and then in private life he's like the party guy and has the two sides like that also.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of like, if they haven't really managed to master it yet, where you have like, this guy is a serial killer, and they haven't quite mastered the fact that he is completely and utterly charming and suave and classy, and could walk into any place in the world and order a drink off of the expensive list, and you know, no one would bat an eye, and yet when it actually comes down to it, he can kill someone with a pencil. Like they haven't quite managed to get that level of like extreme juxtaposition, because like for some, like often if they're doing the suave Bond, he's suave even when he kills people and it's graceful and lovely, or if they're doing the slightly more gritty Bond, they like don't make him so suave and so like untouchable. Like he's like, I feel like the Bond that kind of I feel like I haven't really seen but should be kind of the iconic Bond is the one that's like you would never think he would murder anyone because he's just so pristine, and yet when it gets down to it, he's like a scary, scary human being.
That's the thing, though. Like, would that mean that Bond is like a sociopath, that he could just go around and murder a bunch of people and then the next day go to a cocktail party and feel no guilt
Is
about
he not a sociopath?
There's one scene in particular I think of, and it's in the very first Bond movie, Dr. No, and it's the scene where Connery has set up. He's kind of set himself up in this hotel bedroom, and he's put this pillow on the bed, you know, to make it look like he's sleeping there. And this bad guy walks in and empties a revolver into the pillow, and then Bond turns on the light, and he's sitting there with his pistol, and he tells the guy to drop the gun and, you know, sit down, and he interrogates him for a moment to try and find out who sent him there. And then he pretends not to notice that the guy's trying to get his gun back. So then the guy gets the gun, and he points it at Bond, and he shoots it, but has forgotten he's already emptied all of his bullets. And then Connery's just sitting there, and he's like, "That's a Smith & Wesson. You've had your 6 shots." And he kills the guy. He shoots him once, right then, and then when the guy falls down on the floor, he shoots him a second time in the back. And it's like, that is very cold-blooded. That is the behavior of a sociopath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's Bond, and it's Connery too. So it's a very interesting scene. But it's one for me has always exemplified what or who James Bond really is.
He will murder you and wash down the guilt with expensive martinis.
And then steal your girl. And then she'll probably die too.
Yes. Yes, kill you, steal your woman, put her in a dangerous situation because he just stole her to be a dick, and then get her killed too.
Yes.
All while looking great doing it as well.
Yeah. But there's awesome
No hair out of place.
Yeah. All while wearing a very expensive suit.
Exactly. Sometimes he wears polo shirts. I think he's worn a polo shirt once or twice, right?
He has worn pajamas once or twice, I seem to remember. Like I think a couple of definitely in the Pierce Brosnan Die Another Day, he wanders around in just some PJ bottoms, and obviously swimming trunks.
Just the blanket.
Pardon?
Sometimes he just wears a blanket. But then
Sometimes he just wears a woman.
Yes, the infamous Hollywood L-shaped blanket, which goes up to here on a woman, but up to here on a man. So.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's magical. The magical. It just that's how blankets are shaped in Scotland. Didn't you know that?
Mm-hmm. Even the single bed blankets is really annoying. Anyway, I'm sure this is off topic.
I mean, yes, we do kind of think of Bond as an exemplary of fashion. I mean, the suits, the cars, and all that, and that's changed over the years. I think sometimes it's actually shaped a lot of fashion. You know, I think people wear suits the way they do because that's the way Bond wears them, or God, haircut. Not so much these days, but definitely I think back, in the 50s and 60s. But as far as the movies overall, how do you think, the James Bond movies have kind of developed Hollywood in its way? Or what impact do you think those have had on movies in general?
I think it's just a huge influence on a lot of things. Like, I mean, look at the Austin Powers movies. Like, it's spawned its own genre of type of movie, really. I don't know what else is at the root of that. I think it's solely based on James Bond.
It kept spy thrillers alive a lot longer than they would have been if it wasn't for James Bond. It became a thing. We were talking about, like, Pierce Brosnan did Thomas Crown Affair during that time, and he just did November Man, which are very James Bond-ish movies that wouldn't have probably existed if it wasn't for James Bond.
It changed the whole franchising aspect of Hollywood, the whole continuation of a saga, and obviously there were sequels before James Bond. I'm not saying there weren't, but there's a lot of sequels to James Bond. Let's just put it that way. And I think they kind of came out of the approach and kind of introduced the idea that you can keep going with the franchise as long as there's change as well. I don't know, I could be talking about Marcy.
Do you think it's going to have an impact on, because we look at James Bond and probably back, at the end of the 60s, at the end of of Connery's turn of James Bond, people might have thought that the Bond franchise was going to die if Connery wasn't there to be James Bond. But, you had George Lazenby who came along, and, there were mixed reviews or mixed feelings about Her Majesty's Secret Service. But then Roger Moore took over, and there was generally positive reception, and he obviously lasted a while. He took about 7 movies. Timothy Dalton did 2. Pierce Brosnan did 3. Now Craig's he's done 3 already. He's going to do 4. So obviously the character is more important than the actor. Do you think that's going to be able to roll over into other important characters like any of the like Superman or Indiana Jones or stuff like that, where people will be more accepting of somebody who's not an iconic actor?
I think with James Bond, they've done it in a similar way to, not exactly the same as Doctor Who, where Doctor Who, they have a really specific mechanic for why the actor can change. But in James Bond, I guess you could argue that 007 is just the agent name, and they could continually replace him. Like, they could build it into the story why the actor changed. And I think people will just accept that the actor has changed, whereas I don't think you could take Indiana Jones and just be like, oh yeah, this is the new Indy. Yeah. You have to have it like his son, like they've done with Harrison Ford, sort of handing it over.
Yeah, I was gonna say that with the fan theory that James Bond is the code name, and that's why they're all different. That's why we talked about, like, Roger Moore and more comedic. Some are more brutal, some are more suave, and that's why there's so many different approaches, because they literally are different agents, not just different actors.
Yeah.
But I think they've actually largely left that kind of alone. They've never really fully explained, the difference between one Bond and another, despite the fact that they kind of reference previous Bond stories, like in Her Majesty's Secret Service, Bond gets married at the end, but then his wife gets killed. But in some of the other ones, particularly like the Roger Moore, there's one instance in, I think it's Live and Let Die, where he's at his wife's grave. He's at Tracy Bond's gravesite. And in License to Kill, they actually make reference that Timothy Dalton's Bond was married once. But obviously that didn't end well. So they tie it in, but they never directly address it. So it's, I think, almost sometimes left up to the audience to determine how the continuity works.
Well, that's the beauty of fan theories. They have so many ways around it that you can say it makes sense if you want to ignore lots of stuff that clearly make it not make sense.
It's weird because for me it was never something that I even thought about, and I tend to overthink things, particularly continuity, but for some reason Bond has always been multiple entities. He has always been, multiple actors. I think obviously if I grew up with Sean Connery and then they changed it, I maybe would feel differently, but I grew up with, my first Bond was Roger Moore, who I remember finding really awesome at the time, and now I watch him back, and some of the things he says and does is just appalling. Like he wants to plunge into the treasures of the continent while surrounded by Egyptian concubines, and like the whole 17-year-old girl who's like, "Oh, Mr. Bond," etc. Like, there's some things that just genuinely terrify me with Roger Moore now. And then, of course, Pierce Brosnan was the one for my generation. And then, Daniel Craig is the one that I'm coming up with now. And the most iconic one is obviously Sean Connery. So, given that those are my Bonds, like, I've never really had, it's not really like a reboot each time because they do reference back and reference forward and change things over. Like the time moves each time, and yet it's timeless somehow. It's just something. It's like it's a genre in its own right. Yeah. I for some reason I always accepted that the character was the same person, despite the fact that obviously it can't be the same person because they look different and they act different and they're from different time periods. But I always assumed it was a continuation of the same character. So I don't know why that it was never a problem, it just is.
I thought the same thing, although I kind of came up with a few theories in my childhood. One, I used to think maybe when I was slightly less educated, I thought that maybe they were just different times in his life where he looked that way and then he looked a different way. Then I realized that was ridiculous. So, I just kind of thought maybe because he's got funding behind him, maybe he changed his appearance, maybe like plastic surgery or some form of facial and body altercation through MI5.
Every single time. Wow, that is one old man.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's a robot. And they just keep having to give him like new skins because he gets wrecked in all his car chases.
Reading, I was doing a little bit of reading on before we started, and it said that like the guy who wrote the second series of novels purposely kept the ages the same. So the only ones that are really later Bond are Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough. The other ones, he's supposed to be the same age in.
Which is weird because
The ones that
Brosnan always seemed like the younger Bond to me. Except for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, he was the younger one, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But in comparison to Roger Moore, most people look pretty dang young. No offense to Roger Moore, but it was definitely a comparison when Pierce Brosnan stepped in.
Yeah, License to Kill and GoldenEye were written by the second guy, and he kept the ages the same as where Connery and Moore left off.
Do we think that Bond has, throughout the many decades we've seen Bond movies, do you think he's kind of kept a pace with the times, or is he still very much rooted in the 1950s, which Ian Fleming created the character and was a product of? How much of Bond is fresh and how much of it is very much rooted in that kind of mentality?
Well, I think
they do a decent job of. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so you go talk because I'm the most talky today. You go first.
I was going to say I think they do a decent job of making him move with the times, but I also think there's a large aspect of the James Bond character that is almost timeless. Like his qualities and mannerisms aren't gonna be like he's not throwing out rad and tubular and like, you know, stuff that's gonna age him. He's just like this timeless icon that so far seems to stay current.
Slightly less educated. They were just different times in his life where he looked that way and then he looked a different way.
That's my voice.
Ridiculous.
Hello, Sean.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Sean,
Because
if you have the chat open in another, or the video playing, you have to close that window.
the plastic surgery or some form of facial.
That's my voice. I don't like
There we go. We have our own James Bond here.
Yeah, I was going to say, like what I said earlier, which is he's kind of timeless because they do move with the times, but a lot of the aspects of his character can just apply at any time. So, like, I keep coming back to it, but Dawn of the Day, the Pierce Brosnan ones, Dawn of the Day was not of a real time. It was not of a time in the 90s. It is not of a time now. It is of a time maybe 20, 40, 100,000 years in the future. It was complete and utter sci-fi by that point. So, like, given that they can, you know, come from that very, very, you know, 60s place and move forward into a complete sci-fi place and still somehow remain not entirely grounded, but within an internal logic for the little James Bond universe, or at least per film universe, means that I think it is timeless. I think Bond will be around forever, but definitely they had to post Austin Powers really, really turn over a new leaf to keep it from being too insane. Is anyone else getting weird chewing noises?
Yes. Do you have headphones on, Sean?
I have nothing on. Wait, I do have a tux on, but that's beside the point.
Unless that's just what you look like nutless. That's.
I think whatever the noise is Sean, because it keeps skipping to him. I have the sound activates the big picture and keeps showing him when he's not saying anything.
Yeah.
The camera wants
you
to
put headphones on.
The camera loves you, Sean. The camera loves you.
Finally,
He
someone
loves
does.
the bow tie.
We all love you, Sean.
Okay, I don't know if you want me to say anything, really. Interesting point that Jenny was making there about James Bond being sort of timeless, because we don't really define what James Bond is. Everyone has their own definition, I suppose. Looking at Sean Connery, he was arguably the ultimate James Bond. Maybe because his name was Sean, who knows? But he was the perfect balance of rugged, handsome, and dangerous, I think. He was so suave. If you go to Roger Moore, he was, you know, handsome and goofy. Then, if you thought about who would be a perfect replacement for him, yeah, sure, we have Timothy Dalton, who really doesn't get enough respect. I think he gets too much hate. I don't know if he's anyone's favorite James Bond, but he's
kind of a forgotten Bond.
I think he really gets too much hate. But if you thought about who would make a great James Bond, you would think Pierce Brosnan. But you can argue that his movies were not really great. I mean, he seemed like James Bond, but his movies weren't exactly classic, I think. At least in my opinion.
Is that due to his Bond or the general everything that goes on? Sorry, Jenny.
I once saw a horrible movie with Kerry Russell called 8 Days a Week, and her favorite James Bond is Timothy Dalton. And it's like a big plot point. This guy is in love with her and sitting in her front yard for like months and starts talking to her and gets all pissed off that she likes Timothy Dalton.
Maybe that's the reason it was a bad movie, right? because she liked Timothy Dalton so much.
Yeah, I say bad Kerry Russell movie like there's good Kerry Russell movies, but
Yeah. With August Rush aside, I mean, that's really just bad. I mean, I know it was a point of contention on who the best James Bond was among the 3 nerds in season 6 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Well, I think a lot of people have had that discussion over who the best Bond was. I mean, the answer is obvious. It's Sean Connery, but, there are a couple other notables. So.
I think Daniel Craig is doing an excellent job there. He's not who everybody envisioned a James Bond to begin with, but besides that, his movies have been pretty awesome. He does seem to throw back to what Ian Fleming wrote in the novels of a rugged, dangerous man.
Yeah, and that's been the interesting piece. I mean, we've talked a little bit about kind of the balance between the cold-blooded brutality of Bond versus kind of the smooth, suave sophistication. And Daniel Craig's been very able to walk that line and portray both those aspects of the personality very acutely, in my opinion.
I agree.
Sorry. I keep doing this. Someone else is going to speak. There you go.
I'm reading the chat right now.
Well, I was going to say, I felt very jaded when I first saw James Bond. The Daniel Craig one, purely because of the scene where he comes out the water. I'm like, okay, playing to female audiences. But then I thought more, it is all to do with the times and all that, and I don't know, I guess he's what people find sexy nowadays, whereas Sean Connery was more what women, or the stereotypical view of women, what they thought was sexy back then.
Frankly, between Daniel Craig and Sean Connery, I still find Sean Connery so much more appealing than Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig is one of those ones that, with most of my female friends, it's either you are completely besotted or you just don't get it. And I'm one of those, just don't get it. He's okay.
I agree. Yeah.
But, he doesn't appeal to me at all. He can pull off the character, but look-wise, he just doesn't have that same sort of, suave is not the right word, but it just doesn't have that same sort of appeal that Sean Connery has. When you look at him and you think, oh yeah, I could feel 1,000 pounds being on your arm, sir. Rather with Daniel Craig, you think, well, you look like you could maybe, I don't know, it's a very different feeling. I don't know whether that makes any sense. Did that make any sense?
Jenny likes muscular men.
Jenny doesn't really like muscular men.
Sean Connery did come third in the Mr. Universe once, so yeah.
Yeah.
He was pretty.
Oh, imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger as 007.
I think 007 at least has to appear marginally British, Granted, he's been played by Irishmen and Australians, but I just don't think the Austrian's going to do it.
Yeah.
Well,
Can you imagine the Austrian accent? Shaking buttons to her.
Speaking of Arnold, I sadly did not watch Stay Hungry this week like I said I would. I couldn't find it, but I'm still looking.
Yeah,
I watched 6 movies, but I did not watch Stay Hungry.
I think I can make a really good James Bond. I think I could pull it off. I think I can pull off the scary and the suave totally. It's not like I'm a fumbly mess.
I keep thinking
Yeah,
if Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Speaking
was
of
James
people
Bond-
who play Bond, we're going to get in that discussion here in a little bit because I think Craig is only signed on for one more, maybe two. So he's definitely going to. I mean, he's got the next one coming out, Spectre. I don't know if he's going to do anything after that, but we're going to get a new Bond here shortly after that. And there have been some talks about who's going to play the next James Bond, and what are your guys' thoughts on some of the names?
I vote for Liam.
Alba, but what do you guys think?
yeah,
Zac
I saw
Efron.
that. A lot of people want him to play James Bond.
I vote for Liam.
I would be neat to see a black James Bond.
I think Sean. Someone voted for me.
I vote to have a Jane Bond just to be
Yeah.
like I don't actually vote for a Jane Bond. That would be really weird.
Yeah,
but I just wouldn't throw my hat
people
up.
want to freak out about the possibility of a female Doctor Who. What if they had a female James Bond? It's just like, yep, was a code name. Female James Bond. Screw you all.
I just
I
get
really
hesitant on people deciding to do something like having, for instance, a black James Bond or a female James Bond, just for the sake of having it.
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
most people would. Sorry. Every time that.
Necessarily fair to the character or particularly the actor to make them, a black Bond just so you can say you had a black Bond. I mean,
Yeah. I think that's almost where we're going nowadays,
absolutely.
too.
But go ahead, Tor.
I was just going to say, I think that's sort of the pitfall that we're heading for now, is where people are going to be having those, like, a black character or gender swap character, or have a gay actor play a character just for the sake of saying, yeah, we did it first. So unless they can actually come up with a really good reason why, plot-wise, now James Bond is black or a woman, I think a lot of people would be up in arms about that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like how I feel about the female Thor character. It just feels like they've taken a female character and thrown the title on her, rather than creating either a unique female character or creating, really actually embodying the role of Thor into a female. Like, I don't think, at least at the point we are in gender politics, that you could embody the essence of Bond into a female. You could probably do it with someone who's of a different race, as long as they are quintessentially British, because that's one of the sticks of the one of the things that makes Bond Bond.
Yeah, I did a little searching on who people think is going to play, and of course Cumberbatch's name comes up because his name comes up for everything.
I don't see that one.
But no, as long as it's not him, I'll be happy. Like, he doesn't need to be in
Yeah.
every freaking movie.
Cumberbatch is just
But,
too goofy looking.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
here are the people that... go ahead, sorry.
Like, he's good looking
No.
in his own way, but he's not a quintessential Bond looking.
Yeah, there's been a lot. I mean, I'm probably as big a fan of Cumberbatch as anybody else, but he's not all encompassing. You don't need to cast him in any role; he'll be great. Sure, I like seeing him, but let's keep him not where he belongs, but where he's suitable.
Yeah, I hate
Yeah.
it when people just shove a good actor in every single role. Do you guys think Chris Pratt would be a good James Bond?
No.
Now, he'd be a weird James Bond. That'd be a weird choice.
2 words. Not British.
Well, okay, but to be fair, George Lazenby wasn't British; he was Australian. Brosnan wasn't British; he was Irish. So there's that. But I would agree. You do have to reasonably present yourself as a British, at least be able to do a sufficient British accent in order to be James Bond. So.
I looked at who auditioned to be James Bond instead of Daniel Craig. The names that come up are Henry Cavill, who they wanted to have, but he was too young. So now, 10 years later, maybe he's old enough to do it now. Rupert Friend, Julian McMahon, Alex Lohan, and would have been Clive Owen, but he wanted too much money.
I can't see Clive Owen. I can see Henry Cavill. I could definitely get behind Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill is who the director wanted, but it was decided that he was too young. And Clive Owen wanted points off the top, so he was told no.
Well, I think Henry Cavill was in a spy-ish movie recently, In the Cold Light of Day, with Bruce Willis and Sigourney Weaver, I think it was. Not sure. But I think he suited the role. The movie wasn't good, but in my opinion, but he suited the role of spy character. So I don't know. I think he could pull it off.
Isn't he starring in the remake of Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
I don't know.
That's a good question. I know they're making a remake. I forget who's starring in it, though.
I believe
that would be a good test.
Let's see. Yeah, he is. I got his profile up here. Yeah, he's going to be the man from U.N.C.L.E.
That's he might not get a chance to play Bond then. I don't know if they're going to try and cross those species.
Yeah.
But who would your dream casting be? I mean, just throwing it out there. Who would you want to see as James Bond? It doesn't have to be something that could really happen. It's not like the casting directors are going to be listening to any of us.
Well, age-wise, Cavill would work out. I just looked. He's 15 years younger than Daniel Craig, and the next movie is going to be like 13 years later, so he'd be right around the same age.
Yeah, it's tough to pick an exact actor, but as long as you get somebody again who can play, all those aspects of the Bond personality that we expect from James Bond, then you're going to make a good movie. Again, presuming you have all the other pieces in place.
I'm trying to think. Like, there's someone that I've been thinking of recently that I think. I haven't seen them play like the dangerous side of Bond, but I think they could probably pull off the suave side, and I can't remember the name of the actor or what I've seen him in recently. Maybe it might be James D'Arcy, Jarvis from Agent Carter.
Bethany.
Not Jarvis from the films. Jarvis from Agent Carter, the 1950s version of Jarvis.
Oh, sorry,
I think he might be a bit too old, but like I can see him pulling that off.
Let's see if I can get this stupid computer to work. Agent
Chris Evans.
James D'Arcy is his name. James D'Arcy.
He's done some previous stuff before. Again, you'd have to see him in kind of that personality to assume whether he'd be able to be Bond.
He was born in '75, which would make him
probably
like
too old.
Yeah, Daniel Craig was born in '68, so I mean, he'd actually be younger than when Craig started, so by 2 years.
Well, the thing that I'm really liking about him at the moment is in Agent Carter, he is in this little world of espionage, and he is playing this guy who's completely he is a bit clueless, and he's a butler, and he's not there for the action, but he is able to pull off the like suave control, where he's completely like in control 99.9% of the time, even though he's got no skill sets at all in the universe of this espionage world, which, like, I think I was he in Master and Commander? Oh, I think in Master and Commander he played someone minor, but I think he's got the potential to go really dark. He's got the potential to go really, really dark, so I think he could pull off the threatening side to Bond as well, and he is very British.
He was indeed in Master and Commander, I just looked.
Yeah. I think he has potential. That's all I'm saying. Not that the directors are going to listen to me.
They might.
I find it tough to believe that, you know, a whole slew of Hollywood directors and producers aren't watching this show right now, listening to what we have to say about the next James Bond.
Somebody's watching it. You don't know who they are.
Clearly, there's a entire conference who are staring at us avidly making notes.
Yeah. Well, given that Jenny's next to be elected as queen, of course they're listening.
I still don't think you understand how a wiki works.
Jenny once again talking to us instead of going on her killing spree and her mission to be queen.
I am not a Jane Bond. I can't kill people without consequences.
Just drown your guilt in martinis. Suck it up.
Yeah.
I can drown my guilt in J2O. I'm going to be sorry.
Right, okay, Jenny, you've got a choice here. You've got a choice. Either Jane Bond or the Queen.
Well, I've got to be one or the other.
One or the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why can't I be James Bond the Queen?
I like your style.
That's what Q stands for.
You're gonna be on your own Secret Service.
Well, it gives me to Her Majesty's Secret
No,
Service.
I think the plot for that one is, you know, there's, you know, a 007 agent named Jane Bond who overthrows the monarchy and establishes herself as Queen of England. I think that works.
I think this is becoming one of the pulpiest films of all time, and I don't think I have the acting chops to pull it off.
I also think that sounds like the villain's story, like a rogue agent.
That sounds like a
Agent gone
mastermind
rogue.
plan. Like,
Yeah.
I started off working for MI5, and then I became disenfranchised, and I thought, I shall destroy everyone and kill all the royal cousins.
Some crazy woman kills James Bond, steals his identity to get near the Queen, and then
James
kills her.
Bond meets Basil the Great Mouse Detective.
Another great film.
Really was.
Oh, I love that film.
Okay,
Anyway.
well, considering how far we've kind of started delving off topic, I think we're getting towards the point where we need to wrap this up. So let's go ahead and before we sign off, just if you could kind of say how you've kind of experienced Bond in, you know, a few, you know, as far as the movies go, whether you've read the books and what the impact has been on you.
Who first?
Anybody. I mean, just kind of free-for-all topic for the next minute or two.
Okay. Well, I'll say that I experienced Bond. Really, my introduction to it was probably GoldenEye, and just watching them with my family when I was a kid. Don't know that it like super impacted my life, but I definitely see correlations back to it in a lot of things where I recognize the fact that it's influenced a lot of pop culture. So that would be its impact on my life, is that I see it in a lot of things. Next.
I think I've kind of already mentioned my Bond experience, but the first Bonds that I watched were For Your Eyes Only and The Spy Who Loved Me, that I had on recorded video that I watched again and again and again and again and again and again and again forever. And then all of the Pierce Brosnan ones I watched, and I can remember going to the cinema to watch Die Another Day, and going with a set of, we have some family friends who are, they're twin girls, and they are exactly the same age as me and my twin sister, and we all went as a group, and the torture scene in the first, like during the opening credits, one of them passed out. She was so scared of what was going on screen. Like, I'm a very sheltered child, and I managed to make it through that scene, but like one of them passed out, and we had to go out to the cinema and play Happy Families with her for the rest of the viewing. But like all of the Pierce Brosnan ones, I have watched so many times. It is ridiculous. Yeah, I've watched a lot of it. When it comes to books, the only book that I've read was when I was in Australia, and there was a paperback edition of the written adaptation of The World Is Not Enough. And I was talking about this before the stream started. That basically there are very graphic descriptions of the sex scenes in that involving Electra. And I was a much slower reader, and I was the last one to get to the book. My sisters had already read it by the time I got to it. And I was horrified by the description of James Bond seducing the Doctor and expertly unclasping her belt buckle and sliding her towards him across the desk and all those sort of things, and that traumatized me. But my sisters had already read the chapters involving ice in certain places with the Electra sex scene when she's slightly into S&M. And by the time it was my turn to read the book, my mum had cut out the pages. There was just an entire wad of pages missing from the Electra sex scene, and I'm very, very glad I never read them. It wasn't a well-written book. And that is my James Bond experience.
I mean, I haven't seen a lot of the movies. They're on TV all the time. They used to have the marathon on USA, and you can kind of just watch them and just meld them together. I mean, I did watch Quantum of Solace and Casino Royale, like, back to back, so I didn't have that gap trying to remember where we left off, because that's one that's like a direct sequel. I mean, I'm not a huge fan, which is why I haven't said much about many of the subjects tonight, but yeah, I don't know what else to say.
My first Bond experience was watching From Russia with Love when I was 6, and that was also the moment, like, when James Bond was climbing atop that glass. I realized that maybe girls aren't so gross. I could like them. If this particular hairy Scotsman could like girls, then maybe I could too. And that's my Bond experience. Also, I kind of saw him as a secondary father figure, which, now that you're mentioning all his flaws, it's kind of messed up.
I have played hundreds of hours of the video game GoldenEye, if that counts for anything.
Sean?
Yes. My James Bond experience. I can't remember how old I was when I first started watching the movies. I think I've seen all of them though. The first ones I was exposed to were the Sean Connery James Bond films. Mostly because it was kind of an in-joke in our family, because my late grandfather bore a striking resemblance to Mr. Connery. He had the same feel about it, and it really is kind of creepy, the way he looked almost exactly like Sean Connery. And he had the same voice and everything. So every time we look, it's like, hey, was that my grandfather on TV? It was really cool, and I mean, when you're like 6 and 7 years old, you're not really thinking about all the the treatment of the fairer sex, unfortunately, in those films. But it just seems so cool. He had all these gadgets. He seemed so cool in every situation. He was pretty much a superhero. As I grew older, I realized, you know, he's not exactly the best role model, but he still had this cool factor, and that I pretty much watched everything up until the Daniel Craig films, which I still enjoy. Looking back, though, the Roger Moore ones were cringeworthy, to say the least. But hey, it's fun. It's entertainment. He's not a good role model. Don't ever grow up to be like him. But he's fun to watch. So that's pretty much my James Bond experience. And also, he taught me how to wear tux.
Yeah, nobody. I mean, we don't even really know. Most people don't know what the difference is between a regular suit and a tux. But you know, if you know how to wear one, then you got to wear one like James Bond.
Exactly.
Personally, you know, I grew up watching them. all of them. I actually own, of course, all the James Bond movies. I own most of the books. These are the ones that are actually right here on my shelf. So, I am a huge James Bond fan. Yes, I worked in intelligence, so I kind of have an understanding of that field. And I do drink martinis from time to time, so there's that as well. But and again, it's just one of those things you grow up and it becomes kind of an integral part of your movie-going experience, and you just one of those things you always go back to, and I can watch those movies time and time again because at the end of the day they're just good fun. So they're always a joy to watch. So that's the Movie Club Strikes Back opinion on all things James Bond. Thanks for coming out and joining us this week again. We're going to go ahead and sign off. Everybody's going to say goodbye and tell you where you can find. And we'll see you next week. Let's kick it off. Jenny, if you want to tell everybody where they can find you.
Hi, I'm Jenny still. In fact, I am Jenny. Took home to Jenny. And I shake my drinks because otherwise they end up being all concentrated and gross. You can find me at Took It Home to Jenny on YouTube and Took It Home to Jen on Twitter, and I do YouTube things, and I'm English, so therefore I am also both Bond, the Time Lord, and royalty all rolled into one according to the tropes. Woo! Next person.
Hey guys, I'm Tor. You can find me at Tor's Times on pretty much any type of social media, and I won't lay any claim to being James Bond because I'm Canadian, so really I just have to content myself with drinking beer and playing hockey and being really polite. Yay! Next.
I'm Ray. You can find me on RayHS1984 and Ray's Netflix reviews. I mostly just review movies, but once in a while I'll review a TV show or talk about random stuff if I get really annoyed by something I see. Next.
I'm Liam, Servatorix everywhere on the internet. I've totally had my lower third up the entire time. You can see where to find me on my lower third. I like my tea stirred. Sometimes I shake my fizzy drinks, although that's not a good idea. And that's about it. Also, I'm Scottish, so I guess I am James Bond.
Sean.
Okay, I'm not Sean Connery, although that would be so awesome if I were. I'm just Sean Raz. And well, this is the second time you've let me on. Lord knows why. But I was just happy
You're
to
so well dressed.
Thank you, kind of. Well, you can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet, for better or worse. Just look for Sean Riaz, and basically I draw stuff. So maybe sometimes I talk movies too. So thank you for having me.
All right, so the proper mixture of a James Bond martini, also known as a Vesper, is 3 parts gin, 1 part vodka, and half a part of Quina Lillet, which you can't get anymore. So you can get a fortified Italian wine called Cocchi Americano. And if you use that instead of the Quina Lillet, you shake that over ice, you pour that into a champagne goblet, add a slice of lemon, that gives you a Vesper martini. So that's how you make a traditional James Bond martini. And yeah, you have to be a really kind of James Bond geek to know that. My name is Christopher. I've enjoyed hosting this episode of the Hangout. They're probably not going to have me come back again. But in the meantime, if you are a member of the Movie Club Strikes Back family or would like to be, this is an open community. We have weekly picks. You can review a movie, post what you think about it under the hashtag Movie Club Strikes Back. This week, Liam Servatorix actually picked Seraphim Falls, so go ahead and watch that and post a video up on YouTube so we can see it, and we will include it on our playlist. So thanks for coming out, and we hope to see you all next time.
Bye.